So Peter, looks like you are getting a lot of your friends here.
Hey, I love this.
Okay, so let's begin formally. So very warm welcome to all of you, and especially to all our guests and experts today for a very important topic, which is on neurodiversity, which is an upcoming topic. I mean, we all are grappling with our understanding and knowledge about what neurodiversity is. So the context here is, so first of all, let me introduce our experts and panelists here, right, before we go. So first of all, and Anita, welcome. Anita is my old colleague in IBM, and she's holding a very responsible position in talent in IBM, supporting the CIO office. So Anita, why don't you go and introduce yourself crisply? And what is your interest in neurodiversity? How did you get there? Very briefly.
Sure. So I'm the CIO talent advisor, which means essentially I do a range of talent related initiatives, especially focused on recognition for the CIO organization in IBM. And,
globally, right?
Globally, yes, the recognition is global. Some of the talent advice work is more local. So it's a combination. And wow. I have my interest in neurodiversity is really in the context of overall diversity. So I've really had a lot of interest in doing work on diversity. In fact, I used to be the India diversity leader at IBM in an earlier avatar. And neurodiversity being a new area, there's a lot to learn in that space. And so I think I'm hoping that this conversation today is partly me sharing what I know, but certainly a lot learning from our audience, learning from my fellow panelists. So, really encouraging you to ask the questions on your mind, because this is a relatively new field and we're all discovering together.
Thank you, and welcome once again, Anita. And let me introduce my friend Peter. Peter, thank you so much. I know it's around 5 a.m. in the morning, so thank you so much for taking pains and joining the session at this odd hour. And next time, I'm sure I'll keep a little better time for you. Sorry for that. But it goes to show your passion about this subject. So why don't you go and introduce us to the audience here?
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Peter Mostachetti. I am a licensed social worker in New York State. And I'm the Director of Employee Experiences at Employee Experiences Learning and Inclusion at IPSI, which means that I handle everything around the employee life cycle, from the time that they onboard until the time that they offboard and move on to their next adventure. And I'm interested in this topic for two reasons. One, I am neurodiverse. I have ADHD. I was diagnosed 2 years ago. It's something that kind of always eluded me. And I learned skills and techniques around it. And then suddenly when I found out, I was like, oh, makes so much more sense now. But also, I think this is the last frontier of inclusion today. We never know what's coming next. But for right now, I think this is one of our greatest opportunities to make a more inclusive and welcoming workplace for our employees, and to further take advantage of all of the skills, capabilities, and special abilities that they bring to the table.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and welcome, Peter, to the session. And we look forward to hear you've done a lot of deep research and work around this, so we want to hear from you some best practices that we all can learn from. Dr. Saumya, welcome here. So why don't you go and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sanjiv sir, and hi all, it's great to meet you. I'm Saumya, extremely passionate about mental health and diversity. And I hold a PhD in psychology and volunteer as the president of WICI's National Mental Health Council. I also lead the Global Wellbeing Program for a leading professional services firm's Trust and Safety Service line. I'm joining you all from Hyderabad, India today. And thank you, Sanjiv sir, again, to make me a part of this panel.
Just call me Sanjiv. I'll feel better.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, for making me part of this discussion, and with such esteemed panelists on such a pertinent topic, right? Like Peter rightly said, the last frontier of inclusion. So yes, absolutely super excited. I think my pro bono counseling brought me in touch with adults with ADD. And that's really, opened my eyes to the challenges that people face, neurodiverse people face, and hence striving to learn more and more, and and contribute to the field in whatever small way that I can.
Actually, so we feel really, really honored, such diverse expertise here, and we are going to go about it. Before we start, just a brief introduction to the organization that I represent. Vijay, if you can move to the next. So we represent Enabling World, which is a boutique, small HR consulting firm. We are celebrating 10th year with your grace and best wishes. And and this is what started by my partner Sushil, who's also with us today. He'll also be sharing. So we do a little bit of work on a lot of work on employee well-being, HR functional diversity and equity and inclusion, managerial and leadership development, etc., etc. These are few areas that we do a lot for a small organization, but we do some niche work wherever we are passionate about. And thanks for your support. Next. So I think so. If let's get into the session now straight away. Why are we talking about this session today, right? And all of us know, and I'm sure most of us would know, that we are celebrating a World Autism Awareness Day that is on, when is that? 2nd April, right? And can anyone tell me what's the theme for this year, World Autism Awareness Day? Every year they come up with a theme, right? Anyone wants to guess what's the theme this year in the chat? Anyone knows? Okay, so the theme this time is light it up blue. That's the theme, and it's just a visual, a symbolic support that we need to we can give to people with autism and this cause. What it means is wear blue and turn on the lights in your offices or at the houses just to celebrate. That's the awareness. That's the way of showing our solidarity, one of the visual way of showing the solidarity. And the intent here is that, we need to create awareness. And this topic is why we chose it, so that we can all know a little more about it together collectively and spread that awareness. That's the only objective here. And the whole purpose is that we can be more kind to people with these conditions, with neurodiverse conditions, and we can make it a place, this world, a better place for them to live, right? To be very kind to them, right? That's the whole objective here. All right, so with that, let's get ahead with our session. So we got a lot of questions from participants when they registered, and some we have also, I've kept, my own that I want to talk to you. So there'll be surprise who gets what. So I'll make sure that everyone gets a chance to speak. All right. So let me start with you, Peter. Can you unpack for us in a very simple terms, what is neurodiversity, right? What does it mean? Very simple terms, because we all have different understanding. Or it means autism only, it means something else. So can you unpack for us?
Sure. Very simply put, neurodiversity means to think differently. It's just the diversity of human brains and cognition. And usually it shows up in aspects of sociability, learning, attention, mood. And it's just it's a much more inclusive way of thinking about all of the ways of cognition. And it really happens at a neurobiological level. And it's not, and really it's to think about in the way of, so often we think that the way that it shows up, it's not a moral failing. It's not laziness. It's just the way that some people's brains are wired differently. And it's all based in neurochemicals and pathways. And, it ultimately, it just means that ND folks think differently.
All right. So, Dr. Saumya, to you, I mean, I'm sure you would have studied a lot. You are a scholar in this subject. Why is it that I'm sure this would have existed forever, right? I mean, you never know, but it's very recently that we started talking about it, right? Why is that? Where did we miss this, spotting this and acknowledging this or doing something about it? Why recently?
So I'll go back a couple of decades or maybe more, Sanjeev, and what happened with gender. We started with gender, right? I mean, we had similar conversations when we started talking about gender diversity. And look at the space where we are in right now. The same happened in terms of LGBTQIA+. And we are so much more inclusive now. We're so much more aware now and accepting now. And I think, now we are at the neurodiverse level. So like Peter said, it is neurological diversity. It's just that, all the rules of the society get made by neurotypical people, unfortunately. And hence we consider these a minority, and we excluded them from all the conversations, all the policies, everything, so to say. But for all the good reasons, I would say, all the literature that you find on this topic has begun to pop up from the past, I would say 3 to 4 years now. So, and it's only going to increase. So we missed it because they were a minority, or people were very afraid to disclose this. I would say in India, it's also said that if a child is born diagnosed with autism or something, we tell the parents, oh, it's the past life karma that's, leading to this. So imagine the kind of taboo and stereotype that there is. So, but we're moving on, I would say.
So when do you, Dr. Saumya, typically one gets to notice, right, as parent, that, okay, the child is very different, right? And it's a neurodiversity condition, right? The person is going through, child is going through. When do you get to know typically?
There is no accurate answer to this, Sanjeev. It depends on the extent. Honestly, it also depends on the education level of the parents. And how much do you want to, you want to suppress it? If you identify something, do you want to suppress it? Or do you want to explore it further and, help the child, adapt to the world, so to say? So, but I would say around 6 years, 6 to 7 to 8 years, when the child essentially starts to identify letters and things like that. And this is again, one of the neurodiverse conditions. I might be talking about dyslexia, for example. So it really varies. Peter himself said that he recently, 2 years back, he got diagnosed with, adults usually don't have ADHD, they have ADD. That's what they get diagnosed with. So, adults also get diagnosed, and then the world makes so much sense to us. So I don't know, I don't have a very specific answer to your question, but it really varies, and typically for a child 6 to 8 years, usually parents start noticing.
All right.
Yeah, Sanjeev, here in the US, there's two things to keep in mind. Usually autism shows up earlier.
Yes.
And folks start to see that, and it really depends on the level of how the child, quote unquote, masks. And the term masking has to do with how they can mimic neurotypicals. And so if the child is able to mask well, then it may get missed for years. But if there is significant impairment or inability to function within neurotypical society, usually with more severe cases of autism, then folks would start to notice that earlier. But again, it depends on the individual, as Dr. Saumya said.
All right, thank you. So Anita, coming to you, you handle a very important portfolio of talent, right, for a very large organization. And IBM, I know, I worked there for a few years. I have a great regard for that organization for true, genuine intention, like many other organizations, about being very inclusive, right? So absolutely. So why this is important as talent, right? Whatever is there, right? We are all diverse, humankind, we are all different kind of diversity. We all have, whether gender diversity, ethnic diversity, neurodiversity, right? And that is what makes up our society beautiful, right? Any organization beautiful, right? We can be best. Why this neurodiversity is important as talent? What's your comment on that?
Okay, so good question. And I'm going to relate back to what Peter said earlier about neurodiversity being the people who think differently. Because if it comes down to it, when we think about diversity in general, we talk often about different constituencies, whether it's gender, whether it's LGBTQ, whether it's people with diverse abilities, the whole range. But ultimately, what we are looking for is diversity of thought. I mean, that's the reason we look at all these different constituencies. And that's how we want our talent to have diversity of thought, because diversity of thought translates into innovative thinking, which then translates into better business results. So there is always a business case, besides the moral case, that diversity of thought makes that difference. And now you've got neurodiversity, which is literally, as Peter said, diversity of thought. It's literally thinking differently. So it's sad that we missed this one, but it's really, it's about time we started focusing on this one as well, because it's very obviously an opportunity for us to explore diversity of thought.
So let me ask you a follow-up question here. I'm intrigued to answer. A large organization like IBM, for example, you must having different kind of roles. There are some roles which are very creative, R&D, where you need to have people who can really think out of the box. There could be roles which are very repetitive, like network support. This is what the script is. You have to go like that, right? There you don't, fiddle around or do different things. Is there any particular kind of role which are more suitable, where we can leverage their strengths much better than others? Is there any thought as a talent leader? And Peter and Saumya, you can also comment on that.
So first, I want to say that there's a danger in, putting a kind of stereotype into, neurodiverse people will be good at these type of roles versus those type of roles. I think there's a real danger there. Because a lot of that comes from our preconceived notion of what is required for different roles. There was a time when we thought, working late at night is not good for women because it's dangerous, right?
So we assumed for them ourselves.
Exactly.
Without asking.
Right, without asking. I think that's the point. We need to be more open to asking, to understanding maybe you need a certain accommodation for a particular role. So if it's a woman working late at night, an accommodation might be that we have a transportation to drop and pick them up in the night so that the environment is safe. So similarly, can you think of what accommodation you might need for a particular role because you are neurodiverse? That's the question and that's the conversation we need to be having, rather than pre-thinking these roles, neurodiverse, good ones for the neurodiverse, those ones, no, out, don't even consider them. That would be very patently unfair and take away from it. So we don't try to classify. I would not recommend it.
So how do you, Dr. Saumya, go ahead, because I want to get here. Like if you are a recruiter, you are a hiring manager with a good intent, right, to leverage their strength, how do you go about it, right? Because everyone doesn't know well about it. They're not aware, right? Yeah, Dr. Saumya.
The same question can be asked for a neurotypical also, which we do not ask. I mean, is Saumya good at sales? Because she's not good at sales because she's a woman, for example. So why are we asking this question? I mean, my first problem is that we ask these questions, and it's a very good forum to, clear out these things. These questions only, for me, they don't make sense so much, because every individual, I would say, need accommodations. I mean, you name it, and there is some kind of an adjustment somebody needs. I mean, some people are vocal about it, some people are not, some people are very forthcoming. So I mean, it's high time now that we start, there are no categories, they're just individuals, and everybody needs accommodations. I mean, me being a woman and a mother, I love a sales job, for example. So this is my preference. So I think we need to start asking everybody, neurotypical, neurodiverse, what is your preference? What is the kind of job what is the kind of job that they apply to? So if, somebody with some kind of, for example, ADD wants to do a repetitive work, I mean, by all means, interview them, test them, and hire them. There shouldn't be any stopping or, bucketing them into categories.
Okay.
Yeah, a good workforce strategy is always the right skills in the right location at the right cost. That's a good
That's
workplace
all.
strategy. That's it.
So
Period.
that's it.
Full stop.
Great discussion. I think that removes some myth, that some misconceptions that which exist. Which exist in many of us, that and it is with a good intent. I want to help that person, right? It is with a good intent, but I think it's a lack of understanding and knowledge, which we sometimes take wrong decisions and wrong judgments around that, right?
I'm
Now,
going to
yeah,
qualify
Anita,
that
go ahead.
briefly. I'm just going to qualify that briefly, because one aspect is that any job, because we are living in a neurotypical world, any job has a bias towards good communication skills. And there's a tendency in our approach to recruitment that whatever else we are also searching for in a job, we also expect the person to have good communication skills, even though every job does not actually require verbal communication necessarily. Maybe written will work just as well, etc., etc. So one thing that HR professionals can be thoughtful about when they're recruiting is to consider that, is the way we have framed the job, have we just as a standard practice put down excellent communication skills just because a previous job description had it, so this one has it too, and that might put a neurodivergent person in a slight disadvantage because maybe their communication skills might not be as good? I don't know. So to just be thoughtful about, one, the way we write our JDs, our job descriptions, and two, the way we interview. Are our interviewers a little more aware that if somebody comes across a little bit, maybe not with direct eye contact, which might be something that we all say, if you have direct eye contact, it shows you're confident and therefore you're good at the job. But since when is direct eye contact mean you're good at the job? I might have great direct eye contact right now looking at this green dot camera here, but that doesn't mean I know what I'm talking about, right? So some people find difficulty looking straight at a camera or looking straight at an individual. But can our interviewers also be educated to be more open and accepting of that difference? So that's
great point. So I think it will come from the more awareness about it, right? What is right and wrong, it will come with that. So that's a great point. But Peter, coming to you, what kind of adjustments we need to make? Certainly, one thing is certain, that people with talent with ND condition, they need some adjustment, right? And they deserve that to get the best out of them. It makes business sense. Can you be very specific and tell us some examples of what kind of adjustments do we need to make, whether in the way they sit up, is there a buddy, what kind of maybe learning support, maybe workplace environment that we give them? What kind of adjustments need to be given to get the best out of them?
So so this question comes great off of Anita's point. The first place is in our recruitment policies and practices. So we need to be much more inclusive in the language that we use as an accommodation within our job descriptions, within our job posts. We need to be much more aware within our application processes. We need to create very short, very succinct application processes. Overly long application processes, a lot of folks are gonna drop out of the system because they're gonna lose focus on the process, etc.
Anyway, youngsters, the new generation, they don't want a huge long form. They just get bored, right? Few clicks, that's all, right? Not more than that anyway.
Exactly. But also, there's things that we can do within the workplace. Number one, being open to people sharing their needs, being open to the accommodations that would make it easier for them. And this goes across the board, not just with our neurodiverse individuals, but being open to different schedules that allow for parents to pick up and drop off children. All sorts of, all of these accommodations, really just being open to what folks need. But also, when we think specifically about neurodiverse folks, if somebody self-identifies as having some sort of a neurodiversity, being very specific in our expectations, in our asks, when we make requests, what dimension is this? Is this a people dimension? Is this a technical dimension? Is it a business dimension? So being very specific in our asks, making space for clarifying questions, coaching, making coaching available to folks. They have found that a lot of neurodiverse folks with a little bit of coaching can be very successful in a wide variety of environments. and can help with things like distractions or time blindedness or disorganization. Removing distractions, so helping people to create a workspace that removes distractions, noise canceling headphones, things like that. You know, if you've got somebody who happens to have ADHD, hey, can we work on this together? Rather than giving them an assignment and letting them go off and potentially get distracted by something else. Let's sit down and work on this together. Let's collaborate. There's a term called body doubling. And the term body doubling is when two people work on something that is not the same thing. You know, they're working on different things, but they're spending time together in the same space, in the same Zoom room. But because they're together, they're both much more productive and focused on the activity. So those are just some of the things that we can do.
And, just a follow-up question, the coaches that you mentioned. So I'm assuming, there will be very special sensitization training to these coaches. It cannot be any other coach who really understands, the situation, how to really help them, isn't it? So do you have you seen special coaches which are trained to help, neurodiverse talent?
Yeah, I've seen a number of coaches who specialize in helping folks with challenges related to neurodiversity. So they can help with things like disorganization. They can help things with time blindedness, with procrastination, with those types of things. So yeah, they have specialized training and expertise in that. And I personally believe a really good coach can meet the client where they're at and work on those things with a little bit of awareness and an inclusive mindset.
All right. So I think any other Dr. Saumya, from your experience, how do we really help? Neurodiverse talent to really get the best so that they can bloom, we can get the best out of them? What kind of other best practices that you might have heard of?
I have 2 points here. I think Peter, Anita have very comprehensively covered the recruitment process. I'll go to the onboarding part. Make them visit the office, show them that this is the place that you're going to sit in. And let's do this for everybody. Is this ergonomically okay for you? Is the noise okay for you? Because a lot of people are not okay with open plan offices now. Is that okay for you? And this is apart from the flexible working arrangements that I'm talking about, if somebody needs to come to office. So onboarding has to be very detail oriented. This is how the printer works. This is where the printer is. So those kind of details we need to get into, because even for neurotypical people, so to say, so many things that we assume they're going to figure out. And that takes so much of their time to figure out where the printer is, because everybody is afraid to ask, Sanjiv. Everybody fears.
And especially, Dr. Saumya, especially in this remote working that most of us have got into, does it make it even worse for them? What's your observation? This remote working is, so I just want to know, what's your idea? And any one of you can comment. Is this remote working making it worse or better for them?
A lot of them actually prefer, a lot of, people in general, I would say, prefer part-time opportunities. They want that sensory break, I would say. So I would say it has to be a mix of both. So flexible working arrangement is not necessarily a bad option. And the world in general has come to terms with working from home, and we have developed our processes and policies as per that. Secondly, I think to your first question, Sanjiv, I wanted to also say train the managers who are going to be with them.
Absolutely.
I think the 3 words I have for them is empathy, 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 and that training is a must, so that you be in somebody's shoes and understand. And what if the only reason I have empathy because my child is autistic. That's when you realize empathy, but that shouldn't be the case. So empathy training for managers is a must. I would also say managers need to be trained on psychological, creating psychologically and physically safe spaces for these. So I would say have that training for everybody, in your employee base, including the managers, so that we're creating spaces which are psychologically safe, physically safe for all talent, I would say. So these are my,
yeah. Yeah, I've heard it. I mean, there are organizations which go for kind of course. Anita, you may be knowing mental health first aiders, right? We all cannot be psychologist or counselor, but I think having that, we can't be doctor, but we should be first aider, of course, right? You can save a life. So we all need to, in today's time as managers, be like a first aider, right? Mental health first aider, or maybe diversity first aider, whatever you call it, so that you have the basic language, right? Anita, is there any good practice that you are seeing in the industry or in IBM where managers are given this formal education and awareness so that they can deal with the situations with knowledge, right? Empathy is fine, but alone empathy will not help unless you really know about it. So what's happening? What's a good practice?
Sanjiv, as a former IBM, I think you know that like some of the really best practices are there at IBM. So we've got some really outstanding training at IBM for our leaders. And it is important, as Saumya said, that the leaders are the face of the organization for the employees. So it's really critical, especially for leaders, to understand this. Now, but you know, one thing that I've noticed both Peter and Saumya have talked about, and that is really relevant to underline, is that many times when we do things for neurodivergent people, we are actually helping all employees. It's not that it's just specific for this population, because that might put off a lot of people in the audience thinking, okay, it's one small percentage. I don't have the bandwidth to do this. You know, let's leave them out and focus on the neurotypicals. And then, you know, because I just, you know, I mean, that could be an impression. But the reality is that when we work on neurodivergent diversity, and when we look at including neurodivergence, then we're actually being more inclusive overall. And an example of that is something that we used to have at IBM, but now we have in different versions, something we used to call the Fit for You card.
I remember that.
You might remember this.
That's my favorite.
Years ago.
I have used it extensively. Yes, that's my favorite.
You know, it's a simple card that we used to give managers to say, when you talk to your employee, just ask them questions to see what's fit for you. And there were simple questions about what is your communication style in terms of how frequently do you want to meet, or, you know, how much feedback do you want? Do you want it regularly? Do you want to give me feedback? It's, you know, basic things like that, just basic questions on how do I engage with you. I might have 10 direct reports, but each of my 10 direct reports have a different fit for you answer. And that's what you know, when you talk about neurodiversity, it actually brings that fit for you component, and empathy is a key part of it, into all our relationships. And it makes us aware that, hey,
that's a great point.
Employees. Yes.
Thanks for reminding me. In fact, I was in a leadership training just about a month back for a client, and they were saying, hey, you know, how do we deal with, I said, do one simple thing, because I remember that Fit for You card. It's such, I just gave a screenshot. I said, simple 5 questions you ask them and do the way they want, right? Because that's what the world is. So I think that's a beautiful, very simple way of doing. So Dr. Saumya, anything you wanted to add?
Yes, Sanjiv, I'll just quickly, Peter in the chat box has mentioned something about a user manual. I mean, I know we are saying that neurodivergent, neurotypical, I mean, let's just merge them, but because we are still at the awareness stage, it's very important, I think, if organizations get to create their neurodiversity playbook, I would say, you know, a guideline, a guidebook essentially that outlines the best practices for creating a more inclusive workforce for neurodivergent individuals. These need to include, you know, strategies and tools for recruitment, onboarding, training, even retention. So essentially, everything under an umbrella for the entire life cycle of an employee. You know, how do you create a culture of inclusion? What kind of accommodations generally and support that neurodivergent people need? The communication strategies that that Anita mentioned about. So I think if somebody is looking at a starting point, then a user manual that Peter talked about, or a playbook, if you want to call it, I think that's a great starting point for somebody.
So great. So just a question. I mean, Peter, maybe you can. What is your understanding and your experience that if, you know I have a situation, whether, you know, attention deficit, whatever it is, but sometimes I fear because I don't know how it will be taken, right? I mean, there could be apprehensions in your mind, and that, you know, shuts us down from our talent, you know, expressing ourselves fully. We become cautious, right? As you were saying, we mask ourselves. And when you were saying that, I was thinking how much pressure it's there on the child to mask, a particular situation into every situation, right? We take away that innocence and the real childhood from that person, isn't it? If person has to mask, right? We want to create a world where you can be what you are, right? We all say that you can be yourself, right? When you come to the organization, and don't mask yourself, isn't it? Now, how do we, any good practices that you have, how do we integrate, neurodiverse talent into the larger masses? Any good practices? And I also understand if we suddenly leave them unattended into the mad world, in the crowd, sometimes person can get lost, right? And may feel uncomfortable, right? What is I read somewhere, it's a slow imbibing into the organization, right? In any situation. So any good tips from you based on your experience? How can we gradually, slowly, get them integrated into the larger main workforce?
So to your point about masking is absolutely exhausting. And really, whenever there's an invisible diversity, whether it's some sort of a disability, neurodiversity, LGBTQ plus, it's exhausting to mask. And we end up missing out on the talent of the individual that they could be bringing to bear for the organization. It starts at every level of the organization being open to the conversation. It starts at folks in positions of power talking about these topics. So in my organization, we talk about this. We talk about neurodiversity. We talk about mental well-being. We talk about mental health. We talk about, these are things that we talk about at the highest levels. So number one, leaders need to be talking about it. They need to be demonstrating that this is something that we believe in, that we are an inclusive organization, that this is part of our culture. And then it starts right at onboarding. We talk about these things. We talk about the ways that we are inclusive. We talk about making space for different ways of thinking. We talk about, and at every possibility, excuse me. So we talk about it in our workforce policies. We talk about it in our learning programs. We talk about it in our diversity programs. It's really, we want to make it fine to talk about. It's about removing the taboo around talking about it. And then, working, as an HR professional, working with my managers, if somebody brings to me a situation, I have to be aware enough to say, hey, have we thought about this as a possibility? Especially in, I don't want to generalize or stereotype, but we tend to see more neurodiverse individuals in technology. We tend to see that. So if you're working in a technical space, there is a higher likelihood that you're going to run into somebody who is neurodiverse. So as HR professionals, we have the opportunity, and especially somebody like Anita, who is well placed within talent, to be helping managers and leaders to be aware that if you're having an issue with performance, is it really performance? Or is there maybe an accommodation that we could put into place to help out with this? So it's really about not just taking things at face value. It's about helping folks to see what's really happening under the surface.
Great point. So you mentioned something interesting point about performance, right? And I'm intrigued to ask this practical issue a manager or HR would deal with. And Saumya, if you could possibly start with, and anyone can jump into this. We know there's a person with a unique strength and a situation, isn't it? And needs certain adjustments to get the best out of him or her. In the traditional performance system that we have, right? It is a rule book, it is scripted, 5 ticks, right? Do we need to make any special adjustments in the way we evaluate performance of employees, of the talent, including neurodiverse talent, to make sure we are fair and we are reasonable to everyone, to neurotypical talent, neurodiverse talent, to everyone, right? To be fair. So is it a complex issue, and any guidance on how do we handle this?
Right, Sanjiv, and it's a great question. And Peter and Anita, I'll request you to jump in as well. I think what I think is that if I have 8 reportees the KPIs of all my 8 reportees are going to be different. Basis, I mean, I'll be a fool if I generalize it, honestly, in today's, age and world. So they have to be very relevant and meaningful for them. I also think that whatever the KPIs are for everybody need to be transparent to the entire team. I think that's where we'll go a long way in integrating neurodiverse talent. So I think transparency plays a very crucial role. Have different KPIs. So maybe 2 people can have the same if that's the kind of career growth they have in mind. So what kind of a career they see within the organization, the KPIs are going to be according to that. So tweak it, frame it like that, but make it visible for everybody to see that this is so that everybody knows that there are no accommodations, I would say, that, no, they don't feel that they're getting an unfair treatment, the neurotypical people. And that's where the discrimination might start.
So Anita, coming to you, it could be very tricky for a person like you or for any leader that, hey, similar roles, I expect different outputs or from different people. And it can be a challenge. I mean, saying it is easy, but imagine a manager who has, 2 people with a similar job, but, expecting different from different people. It's a bit of challenge, right, in today's world. And any comment from you?
Sanjiv, I think you actually had the answer in your original question where you talked about strength-based, because and one book that I would strongly recommend to all, and it's not only for neurodiverse kind of focus, but is by Marcus Buckingham. He's written a book called First Break All the Rules. And it really talks about this emphasis on the focus on strengths. So I think all organizations need to start moving their performance management towards a more strength-based approach. And where the neurodiversity comes in is that neurodivergents often tend to have a spiky profile, as it's called, where they might be exceptionally good at certain areas, and they might be kind of mediocre or have real challenges with other areas that neurotypicals might find quite take for granted. Now, you don't want to lose out on that spiky exceptional just because of the, some of those other things that they cannot do. And because so organizations can't afford to lose out on that. And so our performance management also needs to accommodate for that. We need to think, okay, I'm measuring you against the spiky stuff that you can do, and I will make sure that you keep that up. And I'm not going to downgrade you terribly for the stuff that you can't do or have challenges with. So that actually, again, works for neurotypicals as well, because all of us have certain strengths and certain areas to struggle with. And if we are able to collaborate and work towards what we call our thinking preferences, and then often our thinking preferences then become our competencies as well, because we tend to go towards the things that we like to do, then we will be much happier at work. And organizations like IBM especially have the ability to job sculpt. So I could imagine that if you're in a smaller organization, it might be harder to do that. So the challenge of sculpting your role in a large organization is easier because there are many others, and so others can adjust as well. So that would be the only challenge that I anticipate there. But essentially, a strength-based approach to performance management can certainly help.
And this could apply to any diversity, right? It's not only a neurodiverse situation; it could be anywhere. It could be applied, right? So Peter,
Sanjiv,
go ahead.
I just wanted to add to this that it's focusing on outcomes, and I feel like I've been talking about this since we had the pandemic and folks were learning to work from home for the first time. Those of us who come from IBM know that work from home was a part of our culture for a very long time. So we learned to focus on outcomes versus busyness. And focusing on, when performance focus on the outcomes that the person achieves, it's and less about the non-spiky areas, so to speak, then we absolutely get the best out of folks, and we can actually absolutely see where they're performing well. So I think, transparent KPIs, focusing on strengths, and focusing on our outcomes, each of those answers brings like a full picture of what we want to do from a performance management perspective.
Listening to all of you, I think the role of a manager, in today's time, and the HR is very, very complex. Actually, imagine, right? I mean, I remember when I started maybe 10 years, 15 years back, it used to be pretty straightforward and simple. But today, it is a good thing that we have started acknowledging and adjusting, and we are expecting managers to deal with these situations. And it's not easy. It's not easy, right? So we need a real Superman in form of a manager or maybe HR partner or a leader for that matter to be able to do justice with these kind of complexities at the workplace, isn't it? So what kind of a question skills we need to impart to our managers to be able to do this, right? We are saying be a mental health first aider, to be expert in everything, right? And they have to do a job also, project management or a technical job in addition to do this, right? It's a Superman, right? We need to deal with that. But any specific skill do we need to impart in the managers? Because in my view, all employees experience any organizations through their first manager, right? And it sometimes stops there. It could be a great organization, but if your experience is bad with your manager, that's your reality, isn't it? How do we make sure consistently and not accidentally, right, that we get a great experience through managers? Anyone wants to pitch in here? I mean, anyone who's interested.
I think Dr. Saumya said it best. Empathy, empathy, empathy. I think
Yes.
that's the skill right there. It's about empathy, emotional intelligence, and being aware of our biases.
And I think, Sanjeev, humility, ability to ask, I do not know this. I mean, it's like, when the movement started with LGBT, I mean, people who were, I mean, there's so many things I will not know about them. But I ask, what is the right way to address someone? The same applies to this, as a manager, am I a know-it-all? Or do I have the humility to ask that, hey, I don't know this, please help me understand this. I think that's the only thing. It's just,
I mean, we always say that as a leader, you can be vulnerable, right? I mean, it's absolutely all right. Absolutely all right. That's a new skill we need to teach. And especially the male leaders, right? We need to especially get into their head. You can't solve everything yourself. Dr. Rajeshwari, I mean, I see a lot of comments from you. Would you like to unmute and share your comment? Thank you for contributing to this.
Well,
If you can.
Sanjiv, thank you for, pulling me into the conversation. Very interesting, of course, everybody is speaking. Whereas now these days, one of the organization where I'm helping them, there are common normal people. They are asking that, see, if you're giving a special treatment to a neurodiverse person or an LGBTQ, and I am also vulnerable to certain stresses, then why are you measuring my performance with a different yardstick? So I wanted to bring that into the conversation. Maybe, the enlightened panel can discuss that.
That's a great point, and that's a practical problem the Superman, the manager or the leader has to deal with. So any comment from any one of you? Do you face these situations where, neurotypical people say, hey, why that special treatment? I hear those comments in my corporate life sometimes. Hey, she got promoted because she's a female, right? That's the biggest injustice or disservice we can do, right? So we don't want those kind of dialogues. So any caution, any tip from anyone from you, Anita or Peter or Dr. Saumya?
I'm going to actually comment just first in general about an organizational approach, because I know there are a lot of people here who are maybe trying to introduce neurodiversity as a concept and in their organizations. And so I'm into like these simple acronym type of things to remember stuff. So I'm going to share it in the form of 4 A's. Okay, so the first A is one we've already talked about, awareness. And there's no getting away from that. That's a critical one. Do awareness programs to educate your leaders, to educate your employees. Okay, that's number 1. The second A is accommodations. And accommodations means, again, the fit for you, for that individual. So
yes.
Understand what the need is and see what is the appropriate accommodation. We sometimes think of accommodations as very expensive for neurodivergence, but they don't have to be expensive. Things like adjusting the lighting for somebody, or, giving them an accommodation in terms of maybe a dictaphone so that they can dictate things, or not requiring them to participate in group activities in certain respects. There's certain easy, non-expensive accommodations that can be managed. So, but it has to be a discussion with that individual. Third is accessibility. And this accessibility is generally being aware of barriers. What are the barriers? So the discussion that Peter had about and Saumya had about the way we hire, the way we onboard, these could be indirect barriers if neurodivergents can't access them, because of the complex online form, etc. So think about accessibility. And finally, the fourth, which again has been also emphasized, is advocacy. And advocacy from leaders is absolutely critical because they role model it. And here I feel one big reason why neurodiversity has become current today is that we have had a lot of senior leaders speaking up about their own neurodiversity. We've had a lot of famous people now in the conscious mind, whether it's Richard Branson from Virgin Atlantic, or
and there was a comment in the chat, exactly same, Anita, as you're saying.
Okay, so Steven Spielberg, all these famous people who are spectacularly talented, and they also have neurodiversity. Then you realize, hey, I don't want to lose whole population of potentials in my organization. What can I do to be more neurodiversity smart? What can I do to create an environment that is inclusive of neurodiverse individuals?
Absolutely great point. And I love this 4 A's. I put it in the chat and I'm going to note it down and use it extensively. I think that really sums up the good framework of 4 A's. Thank you for sharing that. Dr. Saumya, there's a very interesting comment from Shraddha here. She said, I think we're talking about the top-down approach, right? What if a manager is neurodiverse, and what support the team can offer to him or her or to the leader, right? Why are we thinking the top-down approach? It could be other way around also, Shraddha. So that's a great point. Anyone, Dr. Saumya, if you want to comment on that.
And I would go a step further, Sanjiv, and I'd also say, what if a client is neurodiverse?
Yes.
I mean, I would say same thing applies to everybody. Lot of these, and it's all got to do with smart communication within the organization. I'll just continue the thread that Anita started. All of these changes that we're trying to be talking about making are going to positively impact everyone. So that needs to be very, very smartly articulated by the communications team, so that they do not feel, differentiated against, and that these folks are given more, I would say, advantage and things like that. So I would say, again, training for the team members. So again, a first aider training. I'm a proponent of a first aider training for everybody. I mean, we do not choose, right, that physical aid needs to be taught to only these select people. Similarly, mental health first aid needs to be taught to everybody. And it's a reciprocal relationship. Nowadays, I mean, at least in the IT industry, wherein the recruitment, majorly happens for neurodiverse folks, it's a very, very open communication to a very large extent. And I think
we need to be mindful. IT forms a very small part of the whole work environment. Very, very small part, but gets a lot of visibility, right, somehow. So I think I would urge and request, and that we need to be very mindful that it should not only be the IT, because that's a very small part of our society. I think there's a very large, system in our industries, manufacturing, retail, pharma, services industry, banking, where we need to be conscious and make these examples and carry it there, right? I mean, only IT will not help will not help the society, right? Now, I think there's a lot of good communication conversation going on. Vijaya, would you like? There's a couple of announcements I need to make before we close, and then I will continue the dialogue when she's putting up this presentations. A couple of announcements. One is that as enabling bird, there are certain offerings we have on, and in the chat, my team will put the link in case anyone wants to leverage, whether it's a gender diversity or for LGBTQIA or PWD or neurodiversity. So we'll be very happy to support you. And secondly, just wanted to remind next page, in the next month, there are a few important events happening, right? World Autism Day is certainly the Health Day, and then in the next quarter. So in case anyone wants to leverage some of these, maybe sensitization program, etc., feel free to reach out to us. So that's a small, announcement I wanted to make. Now, you can stop sharing. Thank you, Vijaya. I want to ask one question is, what is the role of social partners, right? There are two parts for any person, all of us, right? It's my personal life at my home with my friends, and there's a professional life. Ideally, it needs to be integrated. I can be myself, wherever I am, is it? But it doesn't happen like that. Sometimes you need a very different support system. What is the role a social partner, any organizations which are specialists into this, right? For example, Handicap International, which is called HI now, is supporting the disability. They're experts into this area, right? I'm sure there must be various organizations which are expert, who have counselors and experts in this field of neurodiversity. How can we leverage them so that for that person, both professional and personal life, both can be taken care? So what's the role social partners can play? Anyone, if you are aware, you want to comment on, anyone from the audience, in case they want to comment on, feel free.
So I think, so Sanjiv, if I'm understanding, how can we take advantage of the resources that are out there for us, basically?
Yes, absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
So I'm actually, it's like you're reading my mind. So I'm going to put in, I just put in a list of resources that I really like related to neurodiversity and neurodiversity in the workplace. I think it's about leveraging the expertise that is out there. This is, again, it's one of those areas that we said at the beginning that we don't know a lot about, that, this is a new area for many of us. And I would say that the guidance and the role that social partners can play is get the experts, don't try to make it up, actually talk to people who know what they're talking about, who know the right terminology, who know, who have the best practices, and maybe you can't afford to hire a consultant to come in, but do the research. If you're in a role that's responsible for this type of inclusion, do the research. Make sure that everything you're doing is coming from a place of, I've done the research, I've gone to the resources, I've looked at, I've read and I understand the words that we're no longer using. For example, we no longer use the term Asperger's. So, and it's really important to know that because it's become a very offensive term. So, having the research, understanding these types of things is super important. So if you can't afford there are experts out there. Theo Smith is an ND consultant that I've used in the past, really wonderful guy. But you might not be able to afford a $5,000 talk. Do the research.
Great point. And Valentina, I see there's a lot of great comments that you are making in the chat. Is it possible for you to unmute and add to the conversation? Feel free, if you can. Because I'm sure, has added a lot of valuable comments, constantly. Valentina, if you can unmute, I would request if you can add on any comment, if you can. Okay, so I think we are.
Sorry
okay,
about
go ahead.
that. Yeah, it's just that I'm not, yes, I have a lot of valuable information and I've done a ton of self-research. So maybe like over 6 years now. And I come from a natural health practitioner's background the last 30 years, teaching people how to heal themselves from illness. I don't have what is all these degrees that it seems all you people have. I have zero. I have none.
You have the right intent. You have the right intent. That's most important.
And I fit in with Steve Jobs and all those people who don't have the left brain degrees. As I've learned from neuroscience, the more the school system, the more left brain they are, the harder it is to make someone understand differences. That's all.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And very happy that you're deeply passionate about it. And I think it's the intent that matters. The resources would follow, right? I mean, like Mahatma Gandhi used to say, if you have the purpose, the resources would follow. If you have the right intent, everything else will fall in place, right? With that, I'm very conscious of the time that we are close to time. I wish we could continue for more, and maybe a sequel of this. I think I'm, intrigued, if you could have a sequel of this, right? So there'll be a link to subscribe. This recording will be available in our YouTube channel. So there's a link in the chat. So you can pick that up, otherwise Enabling World, and you will have this recording there. You join us on the LinkedIn as well. You'll have a lot of information around this will be coming. So with that, there's a small pulse. There's a small survey on how did you like this conversation. While I thank Peter, Anita, and Saumya, I'm feeling very rich today, very, very rich today. I came with some information, but I'm going very rich with a lot of insights around what we can do about it. And thank you so much for your time and valuable information. And to our audience also, I think there's a great conversation which was in parallel going on, right, along with this talk that we're doing. And I hope the LinkedIn Live was also there for some time. There was some audio issue, but finally it was corrected. So with that, stay safe, and let's remember the theme for light up blue. That's the theme on 2nd April. Let's all do that and show our solidarity. And as we say, one day doesn't make a difference, right? Awareness Day doesn't make a difference, but the decisions that we take on that day will make a huge difference in our society, right? So let's all do that. With that, stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon again. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.